This is the antisocial socialite back at it again. Thanks so much for tuning in. On your way in, hit the like button. If you have not subscribed, what are you waiting for, darling? Hit that subscribe button, smash that notification bell, so when I get to running this mouth, baby, you are in the loop. You see the title, you know what time it is. Black men do not play into the swag game. Okay, this video is brought to you by the video that I did yesterday about why black women like to shame black men by calling them incels. And I just kind of want to go a bit further, not much further, but a little bit further into this issue. You see, the problem with the black community is matriarchal, meaning that the people who have a lot of the control in the family are generally women. They have most of the praise, they get most of the recognition. I mean, when you look at the communities around the world, you don't see any other group calling their women queens, goddesses, gods. It's just something that doesn't exist, okay? Even when people have, receive awards or accomplishments, they always recognize their mothers, but not their fathers. And a lot of black women will say, well, that's because the fathers weren't there, but that's how the situation was engineered. As I've said in previous videos, I genuinely believe that the paradigm that was established during the time of slavery, where you have, the attractive black females being used for breeding, and then you have the black men who were strong but, lacked intellect, that kind of, for want of a better term, the Negro box style, that has been perpetuated from ever since the time of slavery. And obviously here in the UK we did have slave trading, as you can see with the statues that have been torn down. We have banks that were founded upon the slave money. We have people who are aristocrats today and their wealth was generated through slavery here in the UK. But because we didn't have the transatlantic slave trade operating in the country to the extent that it was in the States, we are influenced by the culture of the States and the mentality of that male to female dynamic through the mainstream media, which is also white owned. So the mental slavery never ended. Just the overt forms of slavery, and to some degree the external forms of oppression was abolished. But in order for that paradigm to continue, the minds of black people had to be enslaved so that they would put themselves in bondage, as opposed to them being physically bound by outsiders. That's where the mainstream media comes in. That's where the propaganda comes in, the stereotyping, the laws, the institutional racism. It's all designed to engineer a community that is dysfunctional. As I said in the video yesterday about the woman fighting the man in the street, and then afterwards, the man retaliating and knocking her two friends out, or knocking his two friends out. The whole situation has been set up that we humiliate ourselves. World Star makes money and is popular because we have an attitude where it's okay to do these things to each other. Now, going back to the whole thing with Irene Yvette, I'm going to put the link in the description. One of the things that she talked about is people who, for example, have been victims of sexual abuse. They do not get the emotional support and the support from the community. That's why wherever they can get help or perceive that they're being helped and respected and heard, that's where they're going to go, which means that they become prey to people who have nefarious agendas and who are being divisive against the black community. And I wholeheartedly agree with that, because we're in a current situation where it's like we're becoming so desensitized that anything goes, and it's becoming an ever-increasing tide against negativity in the black community, because the voices of the people doing the wrong things, displaying degeneracy, out of control behavior, they're the ones who become the face of black people more and more. And unfortunately, they say silence is violence. Well, it's true, when when you're not actively against something, you're passively agreeing with it. And things like World Star, things like Real Housewives, Married to Medicine, a lot of the, Love and Hip Hop, and all of the shows like Power, and all of these shows, they're literally designed to reinforce in the minds of black people that it's okay to treat each other in a disrespectful way. So when you have injustice on the one hand, maybe you're a victim of crime, you're being abused, and then you have this general mentality of hopelessness, powerlessness. This is where perpetrators can thrive. This is where predators have an opportunity to really take advantage, because they understand that there is nobody really looking out for anybody, because we all become so accustomed to abusing each other in some form of way. Okay, so to bring it back to this idea of the swag game, the matriarchy is a destructive force in the black community. It's one of the arms or the tentacles that are used. Feminism, and in particular in the black community, the concept of the black matriarchy is used in order to keep the entire community down. A lot of black people are familiar with the book How to Train a Slave. And we know that one of the practices was separate the men from the women and kids. And anytime, a black man was, excelling or thriving, he needed to be made an example of. And what that would do is, obviously the women have a protective nature, but their protective nature is one that's based in fear, and it's based in restrictions. A lot of the time, the way women protect is to wrap children in cotton wool. I did a video some time ago called Mothers Emasculate but Fathers Empower. And it's because a woman herself is not going to put herself in certain situations. There's certain things that she just doesn't want to do. And we can see this with this concerted effort by feminists to say women can do all jobs. Well, that's true. The opportunity is there, the floor is open. But why is it there are certain fields women just are not going into? Obviously, the feminists try to paint it as there's a glass ceiling, the standards is too high, there's some kind of misogyny. No, it's just these are jobs that women don't find appealing. They're not interested in STEM the way men generally are interested in STEM. There's certain jobs that are physically demanding, they're laborious, you're exposed to the elements all day, you're away from home for long periods of time. They just don't want to do it. And if they have children, they definitely don't want to be traveling on the road. I'm talking about small dependent children. They don't want to be on the road for days, weeks or months at a time. They don't want to be away from their home and their comforts. So there are certain jobs that don't appeal to women. That's why there isn't a huge rush on, of women on these positions. So what's actually happening in the black community is the black women are being engineered to basically keep their sons in a protective position. They fear what could happen to their sons, and this basically cripples them when it comes to their journey into adult manhood, because a man has to learn to be courageous, he has to learn to be aggressive, he has to learn to dominate, he has to learn to be, resilient when it comes to things like rejection and challenges. He has to learn to be stoic. This video is kind of inspired by a young man who messaged me yesterday regarding this incel video, and this is a little bit of a response to him, but it's something that just generally needs to be talked about. Because of the nature of a woman at her core, she cannot raise a boy into a man. What she will do is try to force female thinking into that masculine body, into that masculine frame. Now, inherently, we have a nature because we are physiologically different in terms of our gender. The structure of our brains are different. Our hormonal makeup is different. Our physical appearances are different. I'm not just talking about genitalia. I'm talking about height, stature, muscle mass. Everything about, not everything, but a significant amount of things about us are different. which means there is an inherent affinity towards a particular way of thinking, feeling, and acting according to our gender. So when you now try to force female thinking into a masculine individual, a male, you end up creating what is actually the toxic male. A toxic male is not a man who's assertive and aggressive. A toxic male is a man who thinks like a woman. And there's an internal conflict, just as we see with a lot of women today who are very, feminist minded. They're very liberal and left leaning in their mentality. They constantly have this cognitive dissonance, this conflict between what they're culturally being, primed into in terms of being strong, being independent, being aggressive, being assertive, being a boss chick, versus what they inherently want at their core as women. Because their female biology, their biological imperative to be nurturing, gentle, soft, kind, all these things, that's still in there. But once it's socialized out of you, once you're cultured in a certain way, it's kind of like that culture or that nurture overrides nature. The same is true for men who are raised in a female-dominated environment. That's why you have a lot of erratic, emotional men out here. Men who, are indecisive, they're fearful, they lack clarity in their mind, they're not able to be committed to anything. These are men that have been broken by the matriarchal system because they're constantly being led and, had adulting, as it were, modeled to them by women. They see themselves as defective girls instead of men who are just different from women. And obviously with the social justice warring right now, with the identity politics, with the constant push for the LGBT, which obviously Black Lives Matter is at the core what it's about. It's about stripping patriarchy completely out of the black community, which obviously is going to keep the black community in a disadvantaged position. More and more men are being told that if you want to be accepted as a man, you have to buckle to the pressure of the gynocracy. You have to be effeminate, you have to be soft, you have to be in touch with your girly side, you have to be willing to listen to women. And as a result, if you don't do that, we will ostracize you by denying you sexual access. That's what this is really all about. So why do I say you've got to get off the swag carousel? Because I remember when I first started, taking in red pill content, I remember a lot of guys saying the only way to win is not to play. And I used to think this was quite a defeatist attitude, because I'm like, come on man, you can overcome the challenges. But the more that I understood why brothers have issues, or men in general have issues in this current climate, the more I realized it's kind of like Neo in the Matrix. For anyone who's watched the first one, you can always remember that scene where Neo is trying to walk down this crowded street and he's just bumping into everybody. It's like it's such a labor for him because he doesn't really know who he is and he's not flowing in his purpose. But once you start operating in your masculine energy as a man and you start flowing in that purpose, it becomes effortless for you to do what you need to do, because you're removed from the hustle and the bustle. By the end of the movie, Neo is swimming through the people effortlessly. When he gets to the fight scene where, he's fighting with one hand, he's not even looking anymore, because he's no longer consciously trying to go against what he naturally has within him to be. He's operating with nature, not against it. His nature was to be great, his nature was to fight, his nature was to overcome. He just needed to accept that's who he was and walk in that. The swag game is connected to the incel insult. By making the woman the central focus of your life and sexual access the highest achievement in your life, when that is taken away, your whole masculine identity is destroyed. This is what we talk about by putting, on a pedestal. Whatever you elevate is what can bring you down. Whatever you worship is what can let you down in the end. And can't put your hope and trust. If you're religious, it's obviously God, but if you're not, it first has to be yourself, because anything can happen to anyone around us. The women in the black community want to be elevated to the level of gods and queens so that they can withhold from the men around them and then bring them back into submission to them. If you were a real man, you would listen to me. If you were a real man, you wouldn't say that. If you were a real man, you wouldn't hurt my feelings. If you were a real man, you would protect me as a general principle. If you claim that I'm your queen, act like it. And then maybe if you do what I want, then maybe you'll get some submission and cooperation. So this is a game where you're trying to please somebody who can never be pleased, because the goal is not to be pleased. The goal is to maintain control by making you think that you actually have power. The goal is to make you think that you actually can change this person's mind. This is kind of like the narcissistic game playing that you find with people who have this disorder. They have periods where they're nice and they're friendly and they're easy to work with, but there's always under the surface this gaslighting and this looming impending doom. What's going to be the next thing that this person is going to blow up over next? So you're constantly walking on eggshells, wondering when are you going to now say something that's going to trigger this person. The goal of a narcissist is always to gain attention. So by being constantly unstable, volatile, what actually happens is they are on your mind even when you are not in their presence. And they want to know that even when you and them are not together, you are somehow still controlled by them. Narcissists have identity crisis, and they have a facade that they put out. And what they are constantly doing, especially through gaslighting, is trying to augment reality for everybody else to bring it in line with their reality or the perception of themselves that they want to project. So when we look at the black community, black women want to present the image that they are queens and goddesses, and then they try to shame black men into changing the reality to fit their narrative. And the thing about a narcissist or people with narcissistic traits and tendencies is they do not want to be happy. They don't want to be pleased. They don't want to be satisfied. That's why they move the goalposts, so there's always an excuse for you to be beaten down into subjection to them again. No matter what you do, there's always something wrong with it, because the goal is to diminish your sense of self-worth and self-confidence to the extent that no matter what they say, you will comply. It's a form of emotional abuse. Gaslighting is a form of emotional abuse, because what the person who is doing the gaslighting is basically trying to do is make you doubt yourself. A stereotypical example of gaslighting is you're looking for something. Let's say it's your keys. You will say, "Have you seen my keys?" And the person who is the gaslighter, the narcissist, removes the keys from the table. They will say, "No, I haven't seen them." You will look on the table where the keys had been and they are not there. You go around, you shuffle the papers, you go from room to room, you check your coat, your pocket, your bag, whatever. While your back is turned, they put the key back on the table. And then they say, "Oh my gosh, you're so stupid." Insult to break down your confidence. How could you not see the key was there the whole time? Now they know the key was not there the whole time, but this is how they have moved the goalpost to make you now doubt your own reality. And then they will continue to do little things like this. Systematically, you will start to doubt whether you're going crazy, because these things keep happening where you just look ridiculous, and then they come in like, "Now I'm coming to save the day." What would you do if I wasn't here? How would you find anything? You'd lose your head if it wasn't screwed on. Thank goodness you have me around. This is the gaslighting that a lot of women use, or a lot of people use. And narcissism is going to increase because of things like social media. You know, taking this to the scripture says in the last days, people will lack natural affection. They will be lovers of self, lovers of money, and lovers of pleasure. That's 2 Timothy 3 and 1 Timothy 4. Perilous times will come because we live in a time and a culture where man worships man. And a lot of people are worshipping themselves. A lot of people talk about the spirit of Jezebel, and they think Jezebel is really a sexual spirit. No, Jezebel is actually the spirit of feminism. Jezebel is the spirit of not wanting to be submitted to male leadership and authority. The Jezebel is a false prophet spirit. It's the spirit of wanting to be spiritual without submitting to the true God. And it's typically the spirit of the woman who is in rebellion against male authority. So in these current times where you have OnlyFans, you have Instagram, you have WorldStar, you have all these shows that depict grown women in their 40s and 50s arguing and acting like teenagers, what you have is the promotion of the concept of the Jezebel spirit, and you have the elevation of the narcissist. Self-centered, egotistical, manipulative individuals. So if the black community is a matriarchy, and if a significant proportion of us are being raised and highly influenced by women alone who are not necessarily stable or grounded or have our best interest at heart in the first place, the only way for you to deal with a narcissist and the only way for you to deal with the matriarchy is simply not to play. To flow in your natural masculine energy and to operate like Neo through the crowded streets, you recognize who you are as a man, you cultivate your masculine skills, you make yourself the central focus of your life. You are the central point of origin for your life and your goals, not anybody else externally that you've put on a pedestal. And when you detach yourself and remove yourself from the game, that's truly how you win. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you liked the video. Smash the like button, share and subscribe. But that's all I've got for this one. I'll catch you in the next. Peace.